Checky, checky, Bo Becky. Welcome back to Evil Scuba Diver. Today we're talking about the Oscar-nominated soundtracks. We got Sinners, we got Frankenstein, we got Bugonia, what else we got? One Battle After Another, and Hamnet. And over the past week or so, I have significantly committed to the bit by listening to all 5 of these full soundtracks in their full complexity, full complete glory. And I want to break them down. I want to rank them a little bit too. I want to sort of game it. I want to viewer retention. So out of these 5 albums on screen right now, which one is the worst? Which one is the runt of the litter? I'm gonna have to go with Frankenstein. Here's the thing though, I don't want to be mean, because there's a lot of effort going into this score. Every single piece of this score is orchestrated. There's like timpanis, and there's trumpets and horns and strings and all that stuff. You can tell there's a conductor. They had to like put up the Decatry and get the whole orchestra in this situation and actually record this thing and try and produce it as good as possible. But that's kind of where the issue comes in, is because even though, you know, these compositions are grand and valiant and they really do sort of market the energy of a monster chasing you because you created it, the production itself, the way it's arranged, is not visceral. It's not hitting me in the face, really. I could hear this in any movie that has a little bit of violence or a little bit of action or a little bit of monster activity. You know what I mean? It's not like this thing has a creative palette that, you know, guides the soundtrack of the movie. Like Sinners has like the blues palette, right? In the weird sort of vampire, like eerie aesthetics and the stabs and stuff like that. But Frankenstein doesn't really have anything like that. I mean, you have like these string moments where you have like really like insane arpeggiated strings that kind of go up and down in like a fantasy-esque tone, but it's not anything you haven't heard before. It's just kind of being a soundtrack. And while that's expected, it's not something I am, you know, too enthusiastic about compared to the other 4 on here. You know, if you're getting nominated for an Oscar, you got to do something different. You got to do something a little bit more lively, something notable, so that when, you know, a random kid with an Evil Scuba Diver YouTube channel talks about it, he can actually, you know, joyfully sort of, you know, passionately expound upon why the soundtrack is so interesting, why it should be nominated for an Oscar. But you're not really going to get that here. So what does that say? Well, I think it means that the Oscar-nominated soundtrack of Frankenstein shouldn't really have been Oscar-nominated. I would rather have preferred the Tron soundtrack be nominated, because at least that one has a very cohesive, insane theme to match the movie. It's 101, it's 9 Inch Nails, it's synth punk, gated arpeggios, 80s stuff, really in your face sort of attitude with the music in there. And I'd much rather see that get nominated over Frankenstein, which just sounds like your typical Netflix soundtrack, you know, whatever. The bare minimum should be to get the job done. What we're doing here now is trying to, like, you know, expound upon what's doing like the upper echelon of effort here. That's why it's nominated, right? It's supposed to be upper echelon of effort, but nah. Frankenstein gets the chopping block. Up next, though, to get the chopping block is going to be the Hamnet soundtrack by Max Richter. Sorry for any Lovebird Hamnet fans out there. I know that's my main demographic out there, but this one wasn't as intriguing as the other 3. It is way more intriguing than Frankenstein, though. Like, there is a big gap here. The thing that stands out about this soundtrack is really how intimate it is and how much care and attention and detail there is to like the microphone placement. That was one thing I was really getting into. You can hear the breaths of the people playing the flutes in between their notes. It's that intimate. It's that close mic'd. You can hear the timbre of the bow on the strings when they're playing something very solemn and emotional. It really adds to the intimacy of the soundtrack, which really lends itself to the movie, which is an intimate movie about 2 people falling in love, I think. I haven't actually seen the movie, but the cover of the album, the cover of the movie soundtrack here just kind of, I mean, that paints the picture for you. You don't really need to do any deep dive to sort of understand what Hamnet is about. And I found its focus on like intimate sounds to be really its main defining characteristic. There's a lot of cool, beautiful choirs as well. There's attention to detail. Like, there's attention to detail and beauty in this thing. It's not like they're just kind of like throwing whatever at the wall and trying to paint like an emotional moment to backdrop the actual, you know, movie. They're actually trying to paint something emotional that if you listen to it on your own, you could still feel the same things. And I'm getting this heavy from really the main song on the album, which is called On the Nature of Daylight, which is, you know, featuring Max Richter's own orchestra. So this is like the main one. This is the only one on the album that really has a feature from like a full orchestra. No BS, no satire, no jokes. That's just a beautiful piece of music. It's so emotional and intense. It's 6 minutes long and it's just kind of swaying tones. You have like the undertone of the low strings sort of constantly going up and down with this like sort of melancholic tension. Then you have the beautiful glistening, you know, counter melody over top, which is basically getting infinitely recontextualized by whatever chords are going on underneath. It's the emotion of, you know, saying goodbye to a lover at sea forever. You don't know if they're coming back. They're going to the new world. They're leaving you back in Britain with the tea and the, you know, the taxes with representation. And that is it. That is the relationship done, but a new journey is on its way. And there are many soundtracks soundtracks that like, you know, try and succeed at being beautiful. So that's not really what differentiates Hamnet. What really differentiates it is what I talked about with the intimacy. I like the fact I can hear the room tone. I can hear somebody sort of creaking in their seat as they're adjusting their violin to play something. You know what I mean? It really feels like you're sitting down in like an opera or a Baroque hall or something. You know, you're not listening to like compressed violins. You're not listening to like a video game soundtrack where it's all MIDI VSTs or anything. Far from it. Actually, a 180 from it. There are tracks in here where there's not many layers. It's a choir for one of them. Maybe there's a guitar and a voice. May only be two things, but those two things are maximized in their beauty on the skill tree here. And so every sound just sounds like it took like 100 man-hours to get right. And that I can really appreciate, and that is Hamnet's strong suit. It's not the most insane strong suit. That's why it's at number 4, but it is a strong suit. It mogs Frankenstein. So yeah, number 4. As for number 3, however, which one gets the chopping block next? I'm gonna have to go with the Bugonia soundtrack by Jerskin Fendrix. This is where we start to get into like nerd out territory, where it's like I could actually talk about these soundtracks like holistic album experiences that actually have something really creative to offer. Like all the soundtracks from this point on have an edge, and Bugonia's edge is that it is harrowing. This thing sounds like God coming down from the heavens and revealing himself in angel form to you. And it does this through violent cacophonies of amplitude coming out of nowhere as you're listening to something that might be like an ambient drone piece or something, and then all of a sudden automatically a giant trumpet, a giant dissonant string. It's a soundtrack that aims to strike fear in you, and it works, and it does so at every turn when it needs to, when it wants to, but it can also, you know, sort of like, you know, bring itself down. And when it brings itself down, there is a tension because you know it's going to explode again at some point. Also, a thing that differentiates this soundtrack is it's not only harrowing, but it plays with like these fairy tale notes from like maybe like an old Disney movie or something. Like there's a lot of oboes and clarinets, but then a dissonant chord will come and creep in and remind you that you're listening to a soundtrack highlighting the dangers of conspiracy, but also possibly the necessity of conspiracy. So it's this very harrowing, dangerous soundtrack, but also this very beautiful thing. There's a limbo in there. It's this push and pull that creates the main contrast of the whole thing. And you know, the whole movie of Bugonia is also about bees, right? Bees are very fragile creatures, but they also have like a vibration to them. Their wings have a vibration, and the way the strings are played on the Bugonia soundtrack reminds me viscerally of, you know, like that kind of reminds you of like a bee buzzing a little bit, kind of like that annoying almost tension of like, oh my god, is there a wasp about to sting me right now? That's a little bit of the tension we're playing with on this soundtrack as well, and it's very much appreciated because it matches the movie, right, viscerally with the imagery of the bee and all that. But it doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop there. No, this thing has really weird, quirky moments as well. There are moments where it's just like drone of bass and drum for like a minute, and then a tuba will come out of nowhere and go blah, 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 in a very harrowing fashion. Very much amplitude. That's the name of the game with the soundtrack, man. It puts you into a creepy, ominous place with low drone drawls of like vibrating strings and bass and stuff like that. And then a weird instrument, probably like a flute or a very dissonant string or like a horn stab, will come out of nowhere and just greet you with a nice helping of just danger. And if that wasn't enough, man, it takes its time. It's very aware of the fact that it has this emotional control over you to scare you whenever it wants. So it takes its time with when it wants to scare you, and it lets you sit in the unsettling tension of the dissonant notes and the borderline feedbacking violins, which all seem to be building up to something, but you don't know exactly when it's going to pay off. Like there's no tempo in these soundtracks. You know what I mean? There's no tempo. It's just whenever it will hit, and you got to just give yourself over to that experience. And that's, you know, that's awesome. That's how you scare somebody with music. You know what I mean? You just don't let them know when it's going to get loud again. That's the edge. That's Bugonia's edge, man. That's why it's his number 3. As for number 2, though, I'm gonna have to go with the Sinners soundtrack. This could be number 1. I could see, you know, the Oscars definitely giving Ludwig Göransson the little golden man for his work on this thing. You wouldn't be crazy for saying this is the most creative soundtrack out of the bunch. It combines blues music with the tension of a horror movie soundtrack with, you know, very industrial production elements that could only be done in a DAW to really create more of a larger-than-life experience. You're listening to something that was very much gamed and produced by by Ludwig Göransson to give you all the emotions he needs to give you. And it's very creative with how it blends this stuff, you know what I mean? There's a song on here where there's a blues singer, Miles Caton, and he's singing his heart out, and then all of a sudden his singing goes dissonant, and then before your very ears it turns into a siren, and that siren then turns into a giant distorted swell. We went from blues song to a horror movie soundtrack in less than maybe 10 seconds. Tonally, combining this blues music flavor with horror movie soundtrack flavor is also very interesting too. It kind of gives me the same tone as like when I Got 5 on It was in the Get Out soundtrack or the Get Out trailer, or was it the Us trailer? I'm not sure, but it's the one where it's the Jordan Peele trailer where it's like, I got 5 on it, boom, 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 boom. Two things from completely different worlds contrasting each other. I Got 5 on It and unsettling shit. And they intertwine in a way that's so unexpected it actually makes it more unsettling. That's kind of what Sinners has got going for it as well. And also, elephant in the room is that Sinners is a movie about music. It's a movie about blues music. So obviously it's going to be authentic to that style, and it sounds great, and it doesn't sound like they're trying to make blues music. It sounds like they're just using blues music from way back and putting it in the soundtrack, but it's not that. This is originally composed for the movie. It sounds real, it sounds authentic, it has soul, and not only that, but it is terrifying when it wants to be. It just completely flips the script when it wants to, because this is also equally a movie about vampires trying to eat your blood. Mr. Ludwig Göransson somehow found a way to make the once cozy, you know, soothing sound of a twangy acoustic southern guitar sound like a very demented motif. The blues trope of like the humming over the guitar, somehow turns into like a demented groan, and it becomes an unsettling thing now. This whole soundtrack has just a looming shadow cast over it by this evil, demented version of soul music that is coming to play, and it's sort of taunting the original idea of 60s blues music, which is originally so homey and cozy and intimate. It's just a very extremely creative way to go about it. You can't really knock it, but unfortunately for me, it's gonna land at number 2 because I think number 1 is just that much more stimulating for me, and that's the One Battle After Another soundtrack. Produced by Johnny Greenwood, this is my favorite one I listen to. This thing is weird and quirky and experimental in all the right ways, but it gets the point across for the movie in a way that's so simple it's almost obvious. You know what I mean? Percussions, pianos, blips and bloops of just dissonant stuff hitting you in every direction in a way that doesn't really have any form or function, any mathematical composition to it. There are moments on this soundtrack where it sounds like you threw a drum kit down the stairs and you threw a piano down the stairs and you just recorded it. Or you gave Beethoven Adderall or something and locked him in a room and told him to just have fun with the piano and heard it. And he just played like bum 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 bum, bing bing bing, bum bum bum. Not to mention, Johnny Greenwood comes from Radiohead. So all that intense emotional baggage that you hear in songs like Pyramid Song and Burn the Witch and How to Disappear Completely, that is all present here. And the way the chaos just consistently keeps going over and over and over again, it doesn't let off the gas. Even when it does let off the gas, you go into like an emotional moment. So when you're not being hit by like the falling piano down the stairs, you're being hit by like beautiful strings that encapsulate dread and anger and this like romantic frustration. I'm thinking of the song Perfidia Beverly Hills off of this soundtrack. It's got these strings that constantly rise and rise and rise and make this melancholic emotional moment, but then you have these like lasers in both ears that just consistently go up in pitch and pitch and pitch until they fall out of the spectrum of your hearing. I think Johnny Greenwood just gets it, man. And a lot of this soundtrack isn't much music as it is transient amplitude stuff that just happens to have notes attached to it. It's building uncertainty and chaos through the anticipation of what amplitude you're going to hear next, what transient is going to hit you next. And these piano hits, they're all spaced apart by different spreads each time, so you don't really know when the next one is going to hit you. I'm talking kind of in microsecond increments here. And the percussion isn't your typical, you know, anxious-inducing cinematic stuff like timpanis and giant drums and all that. It's literally just like handbells and like a snare and maybe like a whistle or something. It's very corny, in all honesty. It's like you gave a 5-year-old like a drum set with a drum kit and told him to just like play whatever at whatever random times, and you just put that into the soundtrack because that creates tension. You don't know when the child is gonna want to hit the snare and when he's gonna want to hit the kick drum, or when he's gonna want to like just out of nowhere hit like the tambourine. That's the tension. That's where the heart of this soundtrack comes from. And out of all the soundtracks, this is the one I'd rather listen to on its own without the movie, just walking around a campus or doing something, because it really is like the sound of anxiously trying to get somewhere. When I was listening to this thing, just walking around, I was visibly walking faster. There was a tangible change in the way I was approaching my movement, because this thing really does enchant you you with giving you anxiousness, with giving you a little bit more of a in your step. Like, okay, I gotta get here, I gotta go, and it does so in the most creative way of all the soundtracks. I've never heard a soundtrack like that. Have you heard a soundtrack like that? Because I haven't. I just told you that I have. It's the most original, and I want to see it win. And that's where I stand, man. One battle after another soundtrack for the win. Let's hope it gets it. I guess we'll see. If not, whatever. You know, all these soundtracks are pretty good to a certain extent, except for Frankenstein. I don't really like that one that much. I don't think it should have been nominated. Should have put Tron in there, like I said. But that's my ranking, and if you have a ranking of your own, man, put it in the comments below, because I know you guys listen to all 5 of these albums as well as I did. Holy. And that'll about do it for this Evil Scuba excursion here. Thanks for being here. We're out.